Welcome back. All right, so what we're going to do here today, I'm going to go through all 32 teams, which means 32 jersey changes. Well, 31 jersey changes technically, because I'm not going to change into this one because I'm already wearing Anaheim. But I'm going to look at all 32 teams, where they are in the power rankings, where they started out, and just discuss this. I thought it would be a fun thing to do. And I'll include timestamps because it's 32 teams. So you can get to your team, including Anaheim. They started the season 30th on the power rankings. Nobody expected anything of them. Currently, and that means right now, meaning not power rankings from last Saturday, they are 13th. This does not factor into these numbers. So the highest that Anaheim has been all year is 10th. The lowest they've been all year is 30th. The average for where they are in the power rankings is actually 18.9, which is 17th. What drags it down is the start of the season. So they've been top 10 once. They've been from 11 through 24 times, 21 through 32, 5 weeks. And that was the first 5 weeks of the season that they were in the bottom. They have cruised up since then. Their record is 17, 9, and 6. So they've won 17 out of 32 games, a little over half. And they're doing better than anybody would have expected. So 13th currently, pretty good. That's a plus 17 since the start of the season. Pretty good job. Let's move on. Arizona. So the Coyotes, very remarkably consistent when it comes to power rankings. They start the season 31st. They're currently 31st. Their high on the year, 31st. Their lowest, 32nd. Their average, 31.4, which averages out to 32nd overall. So not quite the worst right now, but they've been in the bottom 2 the entire time. So it says 21 through 32, which is flattering. If I put 31 to 32, there's 10 of them. So yeah, their record 6-21-2. The good news for Arizona, they are not going to threaten the Washington Capitals and their wins record of 8 on the season. So there's that if you're an Arizona fan. Boston. Boston started off this season at 9th on the power rankings. They are currently, as I speak right now, 18th. They got passed by a couple of teams since the last power ranking. So since that's their current ranking, it's lower than their lowest ranking on the season in power rankings is 16th. Their high was 7th. I haven't had Boston in the top 6 all year. Their average is 11.0, which is 12th overall. There are some teams that are tied, but the tiebreaker to me was, which one's higher right now? So if I did power rankings right now, would this team be higher? So that's where I went with the power rankings tiebreakers. They've been in the top 10 5 times, which looks great. But the first 4 weeks they were in the top 10. Since then, they've only been in the top 10 once, and that was only when they were 10th. 11 through 20, 5 other times they have not been below the 20 mark. Their record currently 14, 10, and 2. They're kind of all over the place. We'll see where they end up by the end of the season. Fingers crossed as a Bruins fan, but again, we'll see. And so Boston, there you go. Starts 9th, drops to 18th, again, currently. It was a good start for the Buffalo Sabres. They did start off the season, and again, the start that's my preseason ranking, right? 32. Their current standing is 26th. In between, they've had a few good weeks here and there. They were as high as 16th on the board, as low as 32nd, where they started the season. They have not gone back down to 32nd though the whole season, so they've stayed in the mid-20s for the most part. Their average is 25.9, which is 27th overall in the NHL. Again, according to power rankings. 0 weeks in the top 10, obviously the 1 week between 11 and 20th, 9 weeks between 21 and 32. Their record currently 10, 15, and 5. So Buffalo was expected to be outside of the playoffs looking in, which is fine. But they've also been competitive. They've surprised some people. And, you take them lightly, you may very well find yourself on the other end of a losing score. But 10 wins out of 30 games tells you things are proceeding basically as was expected. Just Buffalo does have more wins than we may have anticipated that they would at this stage of the season. Off to the Flames. Okay, so Calgary, they start the season 17th on the board. They're currently 14th. And, of course, they've been shut down for a while now. Their high, 5th. They were 5th twice. Their low, 17th. They were 17th twice as well. Their average, 10.5. That's their average ranking on the board. And that makes them 10th overall in the NHL. So, pretty good ranking. Tells you Probably a playoff team. 5 weeks in the top 10, 5 weeks between 11th and 20th. Their record 15-7-6. So for Calgary, I'm not sure if we know exactly whether or not they're a contender yet. I think that they're hoping they're a contender. I think their fans have their fingers crossed that they're a contender. We will know better once we get past the regular season, we get into the playoffs. But so far, so good if you're a Flames fan. Off to Carolina. It has been a very consistent run for Carolina. And I've seen the comments, and I know Canes fans think I'm being too hard on them right now. But the Canes have had a pretty good run. They started the season 5th on the board. They are currently 5th on the board. So they're the same spot they were to start the season. But in between, they've been number 1 4 times. So 4 times they've been the number 1 ranked team. The lowest they got was 9th. Really rough week got them to 9th. And they're digging their way out. They're back up to 5th. Their average, 3.7. Is their average standing on the power rankings. That is 1st overall. Their weeks in the top 10, all 10. They have not been outside the top 10. Hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. Their current record, 21-7-1. So for Carolina, it has been a remarkable run. We'll see if it continues. But yeah, so far so good. If you're a Canes fan, you have to think, all right, so when did the playoffs get started? Although enjoying the ride is something good too, and you've got so many good, young, exciting players as Carolina does. So yeah, things have worked out pretty well. We'll see if they continue to do so after the break. Now, Chicago started the season at 18th, and I thought I was being kind of conservative with the Hawks. Turns out I was an optimist. Their current standing is 24th on the power rankings. Their highest was week 1 when they were 18th, and that's it. Lowest, they did get down to 32nd on the 4th week. Their average 26.5 in the standing, which is 29th overall. Weeks in top 10? Nope. Weeks in 11 through 20? 1, and they had 9 weeks so far between 21st and 32nd. Their record is 11-15-4. So everything's kind of turned up the wrong direction for Chicago, but in that they've had to fire management and coaches out and everything. For Chicago, it's a transition year, I guess, and we'll see how things go from here. But they're competitive. Fleury's playing pretty well right now. They're just, the math doesn't work out, and they're too far out. So yeah, moving on. Now for the Avs, they started the season at 4th. They are currently 4th on the board. So that's how that's gone. Their highest has been 4th. They haven't gone higher than that. Threatened to, haven't gotten there. Their lowest ranking, 18th. They had a couple of really rough weeks there. Their average, 10.7. That puts them 11th overall. Their weeks in the top 10, they have 6. Their weeks between 11th and 20th overall is 4. And they haven't been outside the top 20 at all this year. So their overall record, 17-8-2. They've played very well. They're a playoff team. What will they do in the playoffs? Your guess is as good as mine. But for Colorado thus far, it's been a pretty good season. They did have a really tough schedule, though, and that tough schedule did drop them down to 18th. They've recovered since then. They're back in the top 5. The big question with them, can they outscore their problems? So far, yes. Can they do that all the way through and then into playoffs? That's where the question marks come up. But, yeah, still 4th overall right now, and 4th. And overall in the NHL, they're actually 13th. But their points percentage of .667, that's pretty high. So they just haven't played as many games as other teams. We'll see where they end up. If we want to get into unpredictable teams, Columbus is right there with everybody else. They started the season 29th on the board. They currently are 23rd on the board. Their highest ranking, 14th. And their lowest ranking, 29th, which is where they started the season. They have not dropped back down to that level. The farthest down they got is 25th. Their average, 20.9, which is 22nd overall in the NHL. Their weeks in the top 10, there are none. There are 5 weeks in 11 through 20, 5 weeks, 21st and beyond. Their record is 14-13-1. So they're staying in the hunt. They're not getting the overtime loss points they got last year, which kind of hurting them losing in regulation. If they were losing in extra time a little more often, we'd be talking about them more when it comes to playoffs. But they've honestly, I think they've overachieved to this part of the season compared to what was expected of them. And just being able to stay in the mix, I think, is kind of a win for them. And we'll see how things go from here after the break. Now, if you want really unpredictable, well, it depends on the week with Dallas, too. So Dallas, they started the season 14th on the board. They're currently 16th on the board, so they have moved up a bit based on what's happened with them since the last power rankings. And we're not doing a regular power rankings this week because nowhere near enough games were played. And teams didn't play at all, a lot of them. The high for Dallas on the season is 12th. The low is 26th. Their average, 19.0, which is 18th overall. So just below that playoff line, right? Weeks in top 10, none. 11 through 20, 6 times. 21 through 32, 4 times. They've been 21st or worse. Their overall record, 15, 12, and 2. It's been mediocre, and I do hope things get better. I hope that they find some more scoring consistency, because they're dangerous when they find that consistency. It's there for a couple weeks, and then it's Kaiser Soze all over again. And Detroit. Detroit, they start the season 27th on the board. They are currently 21st. Their highest ranking, 16th, is the highest they got. That was in week 8, actually, so not that long back. Their lowest was the first week, where they were 27th. They have not been 27th again. They were 26th once, 25th once as well. The average, 22.3, which is 25th overall in the NHL. Weeks in the top 10, none. Weeks between 11th and 20th, 2 of them, and they have 8 weeks, 21st or lower. Their overall record is 15, 13, and 3. And for Detroit, again, this is the building process where they're slowly building their way back up. I really foresee them being a playoff team next year, especially if Edmondson comes in and if he's another star rookie for this team. I think the future's really, really bright for Detroit. The present, not bad either. Raymond and Sider and Nedeljkovic all being, considered basically the top 3 rookies, depending on who you ask, sure. But the idea of them being 1, 2, and 3 in Calder voting, if that did happen, and even if it doesn't, if they're all top 10, it really shows you just how strong the future is for the Detroit Red Wings. And their present, not bad either. They're still in the hunt for a playoff spot. It's been quite the season for the Edmonton Oilers. Some pretty amazing highs, and then the dizzying low as well of that 6-game losing streak. What ends up happening is they started the season 11th on the board, moved up very, very quickly, but now they're at 15th. Currently 15th on the board. Their high, 2nd overall. Their low, the current one they have, 15th, which is likely as low as they're going to get. I really would be surprised if they go into another skid. Their average, 6.5. That's 6th overall in the NHL. Their weeks in the top 10, 7. Outside the top 10, 3 of them, all between 11 and 20. Well, 11 and 15, right? And no weeks below that. In the record department, they're 18 and 11. It's been a very good year for Edmonton. And again, the questions about this team's ability to win the playoffs, the questions about their depth, and every now and then the questions about goaltending seems to come up too. I'm not as concerned with the goaltending now as I might have been before the start of the season. Skinner, I think, has played well. Koskinen's been pretty good, just overworked. And Smith should be back soon. But again, with the Oilers, I really think it's going to be a what's going to happen in the playoffs kind of season. I think the break came along at the right time for Florida. They started the season 6th on the board, moved up quickly. Their current spot, though, is 10th. They're 10th overall right now. They've been number 1 twice in the power rankings. Their low was 10th overall, which is where they're at right now. Their average, 3.9, is 2nd behind only Carolina. Their weeks in the top 10, all 10. So they, like Carolina, have not been outside the top 10 all season. Their record, 18, 7, and 4. It's not as good as it was at the start of the season. It's still a very good record. They're still 11 games above 500. Even if they played 500 hockey from here, they may very well still get a playoff spot. I think they'd have to play probably 4 or 5 games above 500 to guarantee it, but they're still in a pretty good spot for the playoffs. It's just not as rosy and fantastic as it was earlier in the season. But yeah, for Florida, they've been very good. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, and we really hope for Tampa Bay and Florida against each other again, don't we, people? Of course we do. And we'll move on to LA. I'm getting a workout with all these changes. LA, they started the season at 26th. They're currently 17th, and they've stayed competitive, much like Anaheim and San Jose, to be honest. California teams have proven they're not pushovers, which is kind of nice. The highest they've been on the board is 14th. The lowest they've been is 29th, which was week 3. Week 3, they fell as low as 29th. Their average, 22.3, is 24th overall. Their weeks in the top 10, there haven't been any. They've had 3 weeks where they're between 11th and 20th, and 7 weeks where they're 21st or lower. Their overall record, 14-11-5, and there's that 3-point game for you. They've won 14 out of 30 games, but they lost 5 in extra time. So they're 3 games above NHL 500. That's how that works. So, yeah, LA has been decent at a time where they might have been expected to be going through more trials and tribulations than they are at this point. And they're keeping things interesting in the West. So we'll see if they keep that up. And we're up to Minnesota. Minnesota, they start the season 12th. This is, of course, their Winter Classic. Have you seen the hats for the Winter Classic? Normally I get a hat for the Winter Classic, but I'm looking at them going, what is that? Anyway, it's bizarre. Their current standing is 6th. Did take a bit of a hit since the last time I did a power rankings. Their highest was 1st. They did have first place finish once. Their lowest, 12th, where they started the season. I don't know if they get back down to that again. I doubt it. Pretty good team here. Their average, 6.5, which is 5th overall. Their weeks in the top 10, 9. Their weeks outside the top 10, just that 1 week where they were 12th, and that was to open the season. And that's it. They haven't been outside the top 10 since. Their overall record, 19-9-2. So it's kind of fun to look at and see where the overall picture takes them. And in Minnesota's case, pretty strong performance overall. All right, we've reached the halfway mark with the Montreal Canadiens, which is kind of a nice thing. The NHL now, A through M is the first 16, and N through Z is the second 16. Yes, I'm Canadian, it's Z. So they started the season at 20th, those Montreal Canadiens, and then those rascals found themselves down as low as where they are right now, which is 32nd. I have them beneath Arizona. The highest they've been, 20th, and that was to start the season. And there were Montreal fans that were really angry that I had them at 20th to start the season. Their lowest, again, it's three times in a row now they've been 32nd. If there was a power rankings of the normal variety on Saturday, they would again be 32nd. Their average, 29.2, which is 31st. They're only ahead of Arizona overall. Weeks in the top 10, are you kidding? Weeks 11 through 20, just the one. When they were 20th the first week, 9 weeks outside the top 20. Their record, a woeful 7-21-3. Likely their worst record, I would think, ever through this amount of games. I'm considering doing a video on Montreal, where they're at, and trying to find a comparable, because this feels like unexplored territory for Montreal. I can't remember them ever having a season this bad. I remember after Patrick Roy, there were some rough seasons, but this is insane. Yes, Nashville. So Nashville, they started the season 22nd. They were expected to be one of the lower ranked teams in the Central. That's not happened. They're currently 11th on the power rankings, which is the highest they've been. So that was the highest they got. That was on Saturday. They're still 11th right now. Their lowest ranking, 27th on the board. Their average, 20.5, is 21st, but they're trending in the right direction. Their weeks in the top 10, none yet. I'm saying yet because I think they're going to get there. Their 3 weeks in the top 20 have been the most recent weeks. So they've gone 19, 16, and 11 in the last 3 weeks. So just plugging along, and then everything gets shut down. So we'll see whether or not they pick up where they left off. And the first 7 weeks of the season, they were between 21st and 32nd. And they were struggling against some teams they should have beat, but now things are getting better. Their overall record, 19-10-1, reflects things have gotten a lot better for the Nashville Predators in recent weeks. And so we'll see if they can continue that as we come back to play on the 27th. The Devils. The Devils started off pretty well to start the season. I wasn't convinced they were playing that well, though. Took a lot of heat for not rating them higher, but they started the season 21st on the power rankings. They are currently number 30. So they're currently sitting below where they finished last week. And keep in mind, the current, I didn't add that to all the others so that, like, the current, like, it's just the 10 weeks of power rankings on Saturdays that I'm using for the average. That's it. I'm just letting you know where they are on the board today, right now. 17th is their highest. Their lowest is 29th. And it also shows that I do change the boards every day. Average, 21.5. And so that puts them at 23rd overall. Weeks in the top 10, none. Weeks 11 through 20, 5 of them. Weeks 21 through 32, 5 of those as well. Their overall record, 10, 15, and 5. It's been a rough season. And what's really rough is I have the jersey, but I don't have a hat that says hat. So, or even just hat for jersey. Anyway, yeah, so let's move along. New York Islanders. So I'm wearing the ugly, and yeah, it's a Tavares. I got it for dirt cheap because it's a Tavares, but it's 2-layer. So I mean the layers and the numbers, and it's 2-layer and all that. So right, all right. So the Islanders started the season third, coming out of that Stanley Cup semifinal appearance, and things look good. Not now. 29th currently. Their highest on the power rankings was third. They were 30th on the power rankings I did on Saturday, meaning they just switched spots with New Jersey since then. That's it. Their weeks in the top 10, that week to start the season, that glorious, glorious week. 4 weeks between 11 and 20 on the power rankings board, and the 5 most recent weeks they've been outside the top 20, between 21st and 32nd. Well, 21st and 30th. Their overall record, a woeful 8-12-6. It has been a rough season. They had an extremely long road trip, and then they came home. They had the COVID outbreak, and everything's been a disaster for them. We'll see. I mean, there's still time. They're not that far below 500, but it's pretty dicey. Currently, they're 29th overall in the NHL in standings, and it's not likely. But Barry Trotz, we'll see if he can work his magic. It'd have to be a miracle. Really would have to be a miracle for Barry Trotz to get this team back to the playoffs. We're up to the Rangers. How far are we through this? So we've still got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 teams left after this. All right, and a lot of changes, right? So they started 15th, the Rangers. They are currently number 7 on the board. Their highest ranking was number 4. Their lowest ranking, number 16. On average, 10.2. 10.2 is their average ranking, which is 9th overall. Weeks in the top 10, 5. Weeks 11 through 20, also 5. The record 19-7-4, very good record. Builds on what I was saying last year. I thought they were better than their record, and here we are. They're better than their record from last year, with a team that's very, very remarkably similar to the one that finished last season. So there you go, Rangers. Let's move on to the Sens. Senators. The Senators started the season at 19th on the power rankings board, which was high, and I thought, I think they have a chance. And then it just nosedives, and now they're looking better lately, but their current standing is 25th. Their highest ranking was 19th. That was start the season, and their lowest ranking 30th. So they're better than they were. Their overall average, 25.8. That's 26th in terms of overall ranking around the NHL. No weeks in the top 10. 2 weeks between 11th and 20th, which are the first 2 weeks of the season. They were 19th, and then they dropped to 20th, and then they dropped out. And for the remainder of the 8 weeks, those 8 weeks they've spent in the region below 21st. So yeah, their overall record's 9-17-2. It has been a rough year for the Ottawa Senators in general, and the power rankings definitely reflect that. My optimism having them at 19th dashed pretty quickly, and yeah, we'll see whether or not they can come back from that. The Flyers had an interesting start to the season. They had a very tough schedule, the toughest schedule in the NHL if you look at strength of schedule. And so I was giving them a break, and then they started losing to teams they should have beat, and they started losing bad against teams they weren't supposed to beat. So they started the season at 24th. Their current ranking is 28th. Their high was 6th. They were playing well, just it all started going wrong. Their low is 30th. The truth is somewhere in the middle between 6th and 30th. And by in the middle, I mean probably right near that playoff line. Their average, 17.6, is 16th. It is tied with the team I'm about to talk about next, which is odd, but they've passed each other. So this is kind of one of those things. Weeks in top 10, 4. Weeks from 11 through 20 is 2. And weeks 21 through 32, 4. So it's been a best of times, worst of times for Philly. The record, 12-12-5, right in the middle of the mediocrity of 500, right? So we'll see whether or not they can get things rolling for themselves after the break. But right now, they sit 28th overall on the board. And on to Pittsburgh. So the Penguins, they started the season at 16th on the power rankings board. They currently sit at 12th, which is actually higher than their high for the power rankings videos, which was 13th. So yes, they have moved up another spot. It's been a slow move because they've played a lot of opponents who are near the bottom of the standings, right? So their record is good. They'll start moving up the board a little bit higher when we see them against that top competition. Their low was 25th, which was relatively early in the season. Their average 17.6, same as Philly, but I'm giving them 15th ahead of Philly because right now they're way above Philly. And if we added the numbers for this coming week, if I was to have a power rankings, Pittsburgh would definitely be ahead of Philly. Weeks in top 10, none, but they've had 8 weeks where they're between 11th and 20th. 2 weeks where they're 21st or below. Their overall record 17, 8, and 5. And like I said, they're beating the teams they're supposed to right now. We'll see what happens when their schedule gets a little bit tougher. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens then. But Pittsburgh has to be pretty happy about things at this stage of the game. Sharks. So the Sharks, rounding out the 3 California teams at this point, they started the season 28th, but their current spot is 22nd on the board. Much like LA, it depends on the game with them. You may get a great game that makes you say, you know what, this team can make the playoffs. You might get a terrible game where you're like, well, it's another year off for them in the playoffs. Their high is 11th overall. Their low is 28th, where they started the season. Their average, 19.0, which is 19th. Works out kind of nicely, doesn't it? Weeks in the top 10, none. They were close, but they didn't get there. 7 weeks between 11th and 20th, and 3 weeks between 21st and 32nd. Right now they're 22nd. They've been 20th, I think, 3 times. It's interesting to see how they've been pretty steady and hanging around that almost top 16 area for the most part. They're 15, 14, and 1. So again, they're winning half their games. They win enough to give hope to fans that really want to see them make the playoffs. They lose enough too that makes you wonder if this is going to be the year. And they're another team that if they were losing more in overtime or shootouts, they'd end up with that better record, which is a whole other debate for a whole other time. Seattle, expansion. Expansion hasn't been kind to Seattle, but that could be expected. They started the season at 25th, and I remember there were some comments about me having them too low. The 25th, well, no, they'll be better than that. It's the Pacific. Right now, they're 27th on the board. The highest they've gotten this year is 22nd, and there was some debate about whether I had them too high when they were 22nd. They've been as low as 32. Their average, 27.0, that is 30th. They are ahead of only Montreal and Arizona on the average. Their weeks in the top 10, none. Their weeks in the top 20, also none. So they have 10 weeks where they've been 22nd and lower, because 22nd is as high as they get. Their overall record, 10, 17, and 3. Not entirely surprising to see them have that poor of a record, but it is disappointing. And the fact that goaltending has let them down has also been somewhat surprising. But again, we'll see what they do from here and what Ron Francis does with that magnificent cap space he has sitting there. Okay, St. Louis. They start 13th at the start of the season, and they're currently 9th, where they've resided for the last couple of weeks. So it's been a slow climb for St. Louis. They were as high as 4th early in the season. They dropped as low as 16th. They've been on a steady climb since then. 16, 11, 11, 9, 9. Now they're still 9th. But their average on the season is 8.6, which is 8th. So very good on average. Weeks in the top 10, they've had 6. Weeks between 11th and 20th, 4 of them. Their overall record, 17, 9, and 5. So St. Louis has done a pretty good job so far. They're in good shape. Of course, wearing their throwback, which if you've seen the prime green version, it's not as good. But yeah, 17, 9, and 5, good record. Overall standing's pretty good. They could absolutely find themselves back in the top row. And then at what point in the season do we start saying, okay, but what happens in the playoffs? Tampa, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions, going for number 3. They started the season number 1 on the power rankings because they're 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. Currently, they're number 1 on the board. They've been number 1 twice to start the season and now. And this Saturday we just had. Their low, 11th, is the lowest they got. They did have a rough patch there. Every team does. Their average, 5.3, which is 3rd. So Carolina, Florida, Tampa are your top 3 on average for the season so far. Weeks in the top 10, 9 of them. Just that 1 week that they were at 11th, that's it. That's the only time they've been outside the top 10. Their overall record, 19, 6, and 4. It looks good for them to be able to at least defend that Stanley Cup championship and have a realistic chance of winning it in 2022. We'll see. We'll see how much damage has been done to the team just physically going through that grind year after year, and whether or not they can get it done a third year in a row. I'm not betting against them. Toronto. So the ultimate what have you done for us lately kind of team. They started the season at 10th on the board. They are currently 2nd on the board overall. So they've been on a very good run. They were first the 1 week. They did finish first on the power rankings board that week. The lowest they got was week 3. Yeah, week 3 they were 21st. Rough time for them at the start of the season, but they've turned it around. Their average 7.3, that's 7th on the board. Keep in mind that 21st, that's going to drag that average down, so that's pretty good. Their weeks in the top 10, they've had 8. They had 1 week where they were between 11th and 20th. That was a week that they were 15th, and they had that 1 week where they were 21st. They finished outside the top 20, just barely. Their record of 28-2 is excellent. And so, yeah, Toronto is into that what's going to happen in the playoffs territory. But at least playoffs are going to be there, right? Best of times and worst of times for the Vancouver Canucks. Maybe the best of times are still ahead, but right now a 6-game winning streak feels pretty good. So they started the season 23rd on the board, and I was a little more optimistic than I was at the end of the season last year, where they were 31st at the end of the season. Remember, there was only 31 teams. Their current standing is 20th. They were 19th when the power rankings were done on Saturday. They have switched places with Winnipeg at this point in time. Winnipeg did pass them. Their lowest ranking, 30th. And their average, 26.4. That is 28th overall in the NHL. Weeks in the top 10, that's a dream. 11 through 20, they were number 19 on this past week's power rankings. The only time they've been in the top 20. 9 times outside of that, they were between 21st and 32nd. Their record, 14-15-2, isn't great. It's a heck of a lot better than it was. So at least things are trending in the right direction for Vancouver. Can they keep it that way? It'll be up to Bruce. Vegas. The Vegas Golden Knights. They start the season at 2nd on the board. And honestly, they're going to be favorites for, I think, as long as Stone and Pacioretty are there, as long as they can keep this up. Who knows? Their current standing is 8th on the board. They've come back up to 8th. Their high was 2nd, so they achieved that the first week. They immediately nosedived. It was just, their start to the season was miserable. Their lowest ranking was 20th overall. Just get that, there we go. 20th overall is the lowest ranking. Their average, 13.5. That's 13th overall. Their weeks in the top 10, 2. The start of the season, before it actually starts, my season starting power rankings, and now. And their weeks between 11th and 20th, 8. Basically, they've been in the hunt the whole season. They've never really gone into a huge tailspin. Just that start of the season started scary. But they've never fallen out of the top 20. And their overall record's 20-11. It's been a pretty solid season for them. And again, you get a Marc-Andre Fleury jersey for $40 when you see that. You're just like, all right, sure, $40. No problem. I'll do that because it's $40. Anyways, moving on to Washington. Capitals. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching the sunset. Now it's dark out. So, this has taken a lot longer than I thought it would. I was even going to go more in depth. Thank God I didn't. I would have died. So the Capitals, they start the season at 8th on the power rankings. They are currently 3rd. The highest they've gotten on the season is 2nd. The lowest they've been is 12th. It's been a very successful season for Washington, though. Although they do lose a lot of games after the 60 minutes have finished. A lot of overtime and shootout losses in here. Their weeks in the top 10, 9 of them. They've averaged 5.7 on the power rankings, which is 4th. So they're very highly ranked overall. They've only been outside the top 10 once, and that was the week they were 12th. 18-6-7 is their record. So again, it's a pretty good record. It's not bad. However, while they've only lost 6 in regulation, they've also won 18 and dropped 13. If you look at it from just that pure win-loss perspective, really depends on how you look at it. But for me right now, I see them as one of the better teams in the league. I have them ranked 3rd. And once everybody's back and healthy, this team could be extremely dangerous, and they might be in it for another Stanley Cup. It could happen. It's been, we're on 3 years now since that first Stanley Cup. Maybe it's time for another run. And now we'll finish off with Winnipeg. And Winnipeg. So remember, this is one take. I've paused every single time it's been one take. I've been terrified. Okay. Don't want to jinx it. Starts 7th. The Winnipeg Jets do start the season. Their current standing is 19th. They just swapped with Vancouver since the last power rankings. Don't read anything into that, Vancouver fans. Don't hate on me. They already do. 7th is the highest they've been. The lowest they've been is 20th. Their average is 14th. Let me go ahead and straighten that up a little bit. There. 14th, 14.1 is the average for 14th on the average ranking. Their weeks in the top 10, they've had 3. They've been 7 twice. They've been 10th once. 7 times they've been between 11th and 20th on the power rankings. And their record is 14, 11, and 5. They haven't fallen out of the top 20 yet. Will they? We'll see. Really, really close last week, but didn't fall out of it. And then they had a win against St. Louis. We'll see if that's the start of something for them. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of the season unfolds, right? There you go. All 32 teams, 32 jerseys. I got her done. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.